Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, where we uncover the pivotal stories that shape extraordinary leaders. I'm Dusty Holcomb, and on this show, we don't just talk about leadership, we decode it. In every episode, we sit down with the change makers who've walked through the fire, challenged the status quo, and emerged with wisdom worth sharing. These aren't just lessons, they're lived experiences, real moments that reveal the mindset, resilience, and clarity behind creating lasting impact. Today, you'll hear one of those stories. Our guest is Eric Collette, the CEO of A Mind for All Seasons. He's a nationally recognized brain health expert, speaker, and a consultant who helps people and organizations across the United States optimize cognitive and mental performance. Together, we're going to dig into the practical ways leaders can protect their brains, elevate capacity, and design brain-healthy cultures that sustain performance. Let's get into it. This is Leadership Unlocked. Eric, I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on the podcast, for our audience, for me, to learn about this topic that you're an expert in and passionate about. And let me just go ahead and jump right in with a question. Is my brain declining in an unrecoverable way? Like, are my smartest days behind me, or my most mentally strong days behind me at this point in my life?
I think the short answer to that is a resounding no. You are not ever stuck with the brain that you have right now. The brain's very plastic. It's moldable. It's changeable. You can do so much to take action to have a better brain, regardless of your age. I've seen this in people that are in their 90s. I've seen it with people in their 30s. And that is so exciting. And it's a message that needs to spread because so many people are unaware of the key, simple, straightforward, research-based things that you can do to have a better brain.
I'm so glad to hear that. At least I'm not running into a wall anymore, and my best days are behind me. And when we were talking, previous to this recording, I was fascinated to learn that not only is this applicable for business leaders and people who are just in everyday life, but also like this applies to those that we love who may be suffering from dementia and some of these other brain diseases. Like there's real scientific research that shows not only can we stay sharp, but we can also stave off and prevent, even in some cases, reverse some of the impacts of some of those, like probably most of our biggest fear, which is to lose control of our minds.
I agree that when I talk to people and I say, what worries you as you get older? The most common thing that I hear people say is, I would take cancer over losing my mind. Not everybody agrees, but most people say, I don't want to have Alzheimer's disease. I don't want to have any sort of dementia at all. The thought of not knowing who I am or not recognizing my spouse is terrifying. And the good news is, if you understand the root cause issues that lead to that kind of decline, you can do something about it. If you understand that Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common cause of the symptoms that we call dementia, starts 20 or more years before the first symptoms show up. Once you know that and you understand some root cause issues that lead to that sort of decline, then you can start applying interventions earlier in life. And the advantage of that is you get a better brain today. It's like a hardware upgrade. If you upgrade the hardware, you get better results today. You get more done from day to day, and it makes such a difference. And you get to dramatically reduce the risk of having a horrible disease like Alzheimer's later on.
All right. So just to make sure I'm capturing that correctly and in a succinct manner before we dig into it, not only will I have benefit right now from a hardware upgrade, I'm also doing the right things to prevent downstream risk 10, 20 years from now. I can't even see. So I'm getting a double win.
And I think one of the reasons why it's important for people, Dusty, to recognize that there is an opportunity for an immediate win is that the whole world has said for a long time, oh, you can't get Americans to engage in preventive health care. I think that's bogus. That's a line that we've been fed. It doesn't have to be that way. And the way to overcome it, at least what I've seen in my work for about the last 8 years, is that once you connect people to the immediate benefits from doing the right thing that will affect you long term, then they have motivation. And when they see evidence of progress, especially when it's objective evidence of progress, they're motivated. And that's no different than than we see in business. You know from running a business that when the metrics are improving, when revenue's up and expenses are controlled and we're becoming more profitable and we're serving more people, it's motivating and it makes you want to get up in the morning and get out there and go crush it for another day. And when it comes to the results that we're getting in our own physical health, our energy level, our ability to get to the end of a busy day and still have gas in the tank to get on the ground and play with our kids or grandkids and go hunting in the mountains like I know you recently did, man, that's awesome. That's so good. And when you have that kind of immediate evidence of progress, that's what it takes to also be doing the things for the long haul that are preventive.
Let's dig into this. And first I have to ask, where did this passion come from? Where did this fascination for you originate? Because you're clearly passionate about it, and I'm not going to bury the lead. We're going to unpack this for our audience, but I'm very interested in how you got here and what curiosity was incited for you to go down this path.
It's a good question, and other people have asked me that, and I don't know if I have a perfect answer to it, because for me, it's been more evolutionary than revolutionary. There wasn't just one moment where the light bulb came on and I said, oh my goodness, I need to help people improve their brain health. I was in a high school chemistry class. Our chemistry teacher came to us all and said, hey, you have an opportunity to enter a contest. You can write a paper on a subject of your choosing. It needs to somehow tie in with chemistry. And so I wrote a paper on the theoretical cause that I was identifying at the time of Alzheimer's disease. I don't know exactly why I picked that, except as a child, I always dreamed of solving a really big problem. And I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. We used to talk about business stuff around the dinner table, and we kick around ideas. And my parents were really open in sharing the kinds of things that they were dealing with. And at a young age, I started thinking, I want to do something that really impacts the world. And people say it's impossible to cure Alzheimer's disease. Wouldn't it be cool to do that? I got an academic scholarship to the University of Utah. I thought that I wanted to be a reconstructive plastic surgeon, mainly because that's what my next door neighbor did growing up. And I went to his office a couple of times and he showed me slides of people that got clotheslined on snowmobiles, running into barbed wire fences, and he rearranged their faces. And I've always been someone who loves to learn. More than anything, I was the kid that would go to school, learn something, and come racing home, burst in the door, and want to tell everybody in the family what I had learned, which probably annoyed my parents, my mom especially, no end, because I was just a chatterbox. But she let me express it. She recognized, oh, that's how Eric learns. He hears something and then he shares it with other people. But I thought that I wanted to be a doctor. And then I got into college and I realized maybe that's not exactly what I want to do. I'm kind of doing what other people are pushing me to do. And so I decided that I would study people. I got a degree in interpersonal and group communication. I also studied psychology. And because pre-med wasn't a major, I was actually a piano and saxophone performance major. So when I shifted my major, I kept studying music. So that gives you an idea of just how random and eclectic my brain is. But when I got done with a communication degree, I needed a job. And my wife and I got married our senior year of college. And I had the shocking realization when we both graduated that I was working part-time as an assistant to a farmer's insurance agent making $8 an hour. And I literally couldn't afford an apartment. And we had a baby coming. And I went, oh my goodness, I've got to do something. So I stumbled onto a job as a program director in an assisted living community. And I thought I would do it for 6 months while I was interviewing for my real job. But about 12 months later, I woke up and I realized, you're having a lot of fun. And it sort of reconnected me to that initial interest in solving the problem of Alzheimer's disease, because now I was seeing it around me all the time. I wanted to go on and get an advanced degree in Alzheimer's, but I wasn't finding a program that was covering all the newest research and all the stuff that was starting to come out. So I started going to conferences and reading books and trying to develop expertise. And then I became an executive director, got an administrator's license. After 9 years with that company, I ended up being recruited to move back home to Boise, Idaho and take over a struggling memory care community. I did that for 7 years. We started solving bigger problems. I was getting asked to get on more stages and to coach more. And I was seeing more and more and more possibilities. And that passion for figuring out how to help people with neurodegenerative diseases do better had grown a lot. And so in 2016, I took a flying leap. I started my company. So that's a little bit of the arc, Dusty. That's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but it sort of grew in that way. And everything that I've learned in the last 10 years has just thrown gas on the fire because I've seen real improvement in real people. And I'm on a mission to save the next million brains in the next 2 or 3 years. We can't get it out fast enough.
I love this. Give me an example. Like, I've got a million questions, so I'm not going to ask them all at once, but give me an example of some of the successes you've seen with neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer, where, the common understanding says that once you have this, you're done. And like, what have you actually seen? Then I want you to tell me what you do and how to unpack it. And then we can get to the benefits for, our audience, which is probably, business leaders and company leaders, things like that. But they also, have families, they have parents or grandparents. So I think this is going to be really resonant for both. What are some of the successes you've seen and how are they created?
When you ask that, I think about one of our earliest successes because it's the one that woke me up and added so much fuel to the fire. And it's carried me for a long time. And we've seen very similar results over and over and over in the intervening years. Randy Vaudry, who's the medical director here at Mind for All Seasons, and I partnered together to start helping an assisted living community down in East Mesa, Arizona, try to take a multimodal approach toward brain health. So instead of just looking for one thing or a magic pill, we were looking at a lot of different factors that have come out in the research. As part of those initial pilot trials, there was a guy named Marv who had been living at home. His cognition had declined, and his wife took him to a neurologist who diagnosed him with dementia and said, "I'm sorry, there's not a lot that we can do for you. There's some drugs that might be helpful, but in my opinion, they don't really work. So you can take them or leave them. And why don't you come back in 6 months and we'll see if you're any worse?" Well, they didn't like that answer. And so they went to a second neurologist and they ended up going to a third neurologist. So 3 different board certified neurologists looked at this guy, did an evaluation and said, "I'm sorry, you have dementia. There's not a lot that we can do." And so he went back home, and over the course of the next year, he went from being gregarious and kind of a jokester with his wife and family to being rude and aggressive and abrasive. And it was so emotionally draining on his wife and kids that the kids said, "Mom, you can't do this anymore. You have to get help." And so she moved him into this assisted living community where we were piloting things, not knowing about the pilot. And as soon as he moved in, she found out about it. She said, "Well, what do we have to lose?" We did an extensive panel of blood work. We looked at nutrients, we looked at hormones, we looked at inflammatory markers, metabolic parameters. In short, we looked much more broadly than most neurologists or primary care doctors ever look. We looked at fundamental things that affect how cells function. And we also did a baseline cognitive test. We wanted our own sense of where he was at the beginning of things. And on a standard 30-point Montreal cognitive assessment, he scored 15 out of 30, which was very similar to what had been found by the neurologists that looked at him. Well, over the course of the next 6 months, he went from 15 out of 30 to 30 out of 30. We were addressing things in 2 key areas. We measured factors in blood work, like I mentioned, and anywhere there was an issue, like he was really deficient in testosterone. Well, testosterone's not just about building muscle for the guys. For both men and women, testosterone has a powerful influence on how the brain functions. I've even heard some lecturers at medical conferences say testosterone equals memory. We worked with a local provider to write an order to help him boost his testosterone a little bit. His thyroid wasn't as optimal as it should be. He had metabolic health problems. We had to address all of those different issues. We had to coach the facility through how to help him eat better and become more physically active and manage stress differently and train his brain. It sounds a little complex when I start laying it out, but it was actually pretty straightforward, and it didn't take tons of extra time from the stuff that people were already doing for him in a community like that. Progressively, he just got better and better. He was able to move back home. His wife recorded a tearful video saying, "I feel like I got my husband back. He's Marv again." He's funny and he teases me and his personality seems to be back. I wish I could say that he was cured. There isn't a cure for something like Alzheimer's disease. And unfortunately, he drifted. He fell off the program. He started, kind of like people with depression start feeling better and they discontinue their antidepressants and then things come crashing down again. That's sort of what happened to him, and he crashed and burned. But the fact that it happened was the first time in my career where I had seen someone that I personally knew who was on a trajectory that I thought was just definite, that there wasn't that much you could do about it. And he pulled out of that. And since then, Dusty, I've seen that over and over. I wish I could tell you that 100% of the time people that apply these interventions improve like that. That's not the case. And we still don't know all the reasons why only about 80 to 85% of the time people show measurable improvement. We don't know about the rest of the 10 or 15% or 20% of people that don't do as well. But we're learning and we're finding more all the time that opens the door to a better pathway for people.
There's something there about like you have to be disciplined. You have to follow the process. And to your point, like, people that stop dieting when they get to their goal weight and then they balloon back up. They're like, oh, that's human nature. Isn't like once we achieve something, we want the next thing. We don't want to maintain it. I'm really curious, as you have, that happened early on and you saw that success. What is it? Like, I'm fascinated. I wrote down in 3 different places on my notes here, the idea of a hardware upgrade and this concept of a hardware upgrade. Can you unpack that a little bit? Because you're talking about testosterone and blood work and nutrition and mobility and all these things. What is this hardware upgrade that you're talking about installing, and how does somebody do it? What is it they need to start doing or start thinking about so they can activate a better brain?
Really, the concept came from a business executive I was working with. He's from Atlanta, and his whole goal in participating in our program, which got named the Enhanced Protocol because we're trying to enhance every aspect of life, his whole goal was to improve his brain health because he said, Eric, my brain is my tool in the knowledge economy. I want it to be as sharp as humanly possible. And he opened up and said, as I've gotten older, and he was in his 40s, and he said, as I've gotten older, I've realized I'm a little slower than I used to be. I'm doing fine. I'm operating at a high level, but I get to the end of the day and I'm exhausted physically and mentally. Sometimes it's harder to find my words. They don't flow as easily as they did. It seems like it's harder to learn new things. I don't get as much done in the day as I used to. And if there's any way possible that I can sharpen it, I want to do that. And initially I said, well, what kinds of things are you doing to try to improve your productivity, for example? And he said, well, I'm reading more books. I'm going to conferences. I'm trying to develop better skills and be a little bit more disciplined and not be so distracted by all the fluff that comes into my email inbox and all of the shiny objects that I could chase as a business leader. And I know that sounds familiar to you. We've had enough conversation that I think everybody faces that stuff. We went through the process with this guy, which was you measure things that affect how your brain functions. And you learn what the best research has to tell you about those things, and you apply what you've learned, and then you remeasure and you make adjustments based on the outcomes that you're getting. As he identified things that were affecting his brain health, and he started supplementing some deficiencies, and he changed some lifestyle factors, within 3 months, his processing speed was up on a really fine-tuned, very high-level cognitive test. His processing speed was improved 30%. And at that point, he said, Eric, I am getting so much more done in the day. It's unbelievable. I thought I had to have another time through David Allen's book on productivity so that I can get more done. And he said, now I realize that was like software. Those are good skills. We need to have that. But if you load new software onto old hardware, it's never going to work very well. And that was an aha moment for me, Dusty. That was when I went, oh my goodness, we're giving people a hardware upgrade. And yes, please keep learning. Listen to podcasts or read books or go to conferences and get those soft skills. But you got to get the hardware right.
This idea of the soft skills, the learning, the knowledge, that's the software, the hardware and maintaining the hardware. appropriately optimizing the hardware, it allows not only the new software to run more efficiently, but it allows you to continue to upgrade the software. We've all bought computers, and after 5 or 6 or 7 years, we have to get a new one because the hardware just doesn't keep up with the software. And I think that as I think about AI and I think about all the different things that are going on in the world and how our thinking paradigms are being expanded, the ability for us to keep up with that and to do that well really comes down to our ability to keep our hardware in good shape and continually ready for it. So that's what the model that was running through my head when you were sharing that is, if I want to be relevant and able to compete in the next knowledge economy, I can't just be thinking about I need to go learn the new AI tool. I need to be thinking about how am I creating the optimal environment for my hardware to be able to leverage that tool. And that's the paradigm that I'm wrapping my head around. What are the manifestations that he was aware of, or the people you work with are aware of, that they can see tangible difference in when they take the action steps that you're going to recommend for us?
It's a really good question, and I want to answer it in two different ways, Dusty, because sometimes there are things that people see. So let's talk first about those, but then I want to talk about what people don't see. What you see would be things like, I feel like I have brain fog, which is kind of a nebulous term, but it's used enough that people sort of have this sense that I just feel like my brain doesn't work the way that it should. I feel foggy. Or maybe they have a harder time finding their words. They get that tip of the tongue phenomenon a lot more frequently, which may be a sign that the insulation on the nerve fibers in their brain is breaking down. The myelin sheath isn't so good, and things are shorting out in the same way that if the insulation on a wire is not there, you're going to get some more short circuits. There are foundational things that you can do to improve that. So you might see that outward sort of short-circuiting sense. You might just feel really fatigued all the time. Sometimes people come into our community not even so much because they're worried about their brain as they just are tired of being tired. And once you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you start questioning things and taking action. And you start recognizing that people often confuse what is common for being normal. There's a big difference. It's common these days that people experience tremendous weight gain as they age. And we've got a real obesity problem in the country. There's a serious metabolic health problem. Just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal. I have a daughter and son-in-law who went on a trip abroad to Europe a couple of years ago. And my daughter, on the way back, called me from the Atlanta airport, kind of freaked out and said, "Dad, the whole time we were in Sweden, we didn't see anybody that was overweight except American tourists. And it was shocking to see the difference. And I'm in the Atlanta airport right now, and my jaw's on the floor. And I didn't know it was so bad." And when you see another population that doesn't have the same level of problems that we have, you start confronting the difference between common and normal. It's very common that people get progressively more and more forgetful and they have cognitive problems as they age. That doesn't mean it's normal. It's actually evidence of disease. So people begin to have realization about things like that. There are a lot of things that might be going on that people wouldn't even be aware of. I mentioned earlier that diseases like Alzheimer's generally start 20 or more years before the first symptoms even show up. Often the way that you identify those problems is by using a more fine-tooth comb to measure cognitive performance. People fall into well-worn cognitive pathways day to day. If you've done your job for a while, you're basically on autopilot. You can do a lot of things in your sleep, and those pathways are so well-worn that you're not really testing yourself and figuring out what you're capable of or not capable of. For a long time, we've used a test called CNS vital signs that was developed by Stanford researchers over 20 years ago, and it's been administered about 20 million times. So when you take that test, you are being compared to other men or women your age that have taken the test. Now, it's not a perfect test. And a neuropsychologist that does lots of cognitive testing might say, well, I like this part of that test. I don't like that part of it. But it's at least a more objective measure. It's not a dementia screening test, which is only going to tell you if things are so bad that you warrant a dementia diagnosis. It's going to push you a lot more. It's going to get a little bit harder if you're doing well on the test so that it can find out what your limits are. And frequently, when I have people do that test, they have no idea where they're performing relative to other people because they're doing fine in their job. They're getting good results. But then when you stare an objective result in the face and you say, wow, when it comes to my memory or my processing speed or my executive function or my social acuity or my motor speed, and you find out that you're in the 30th percentile compared to other people, you realize, wow, I got some work to do. And then when you see that improve, like that business leader from Atlanta, and his processing speed was up 30%, and he was getting way more done in the day, you start connecting a measurement with a result that you can observe in day-to-day life.
That's something I really like, because if it's all woo-woo and it's just based on how we feel, we're all going to have good days, bad days, but if you have that objective, quantitative ranking measure that you've been able to say, hey, this is what it was, this is what I've done, now this is what it is. Like, in addition to feeling better, in addition to observing different outcomes, I have a real measure that tells me, yes, this is working. And I think that can fuel continuity. At least my assumption is, like, when you get success, you want more success. And when you can see the scale dropping down, like, I know when you weigh yourself regularly, you're more likely to do the right things and to take the right behaviors. What is it that you would have someone start doing and to really start to optimize their hardware? And yes, they're going to get a 20-year benefit in case they have other diseases going on. But like, I love that this could be a tangible benefit right now. I think that's what is going to motivate anybody to actually make changes, durable, systemic, sustainable change. What is it we should do? What should I start doing? What should my audience start doing tomorrow based on having heard you talk?
That's a great question. And before I answer it, I want to connect one thing that you just said. You sort of hinted at the fact that doing this may affect other disease states. If you look at the root causes of heart disease, the top killer in the world, it's basically the same list of stuff that elevates your risk of Alzheimer's disease, that also leads to type 2 diabetes, that leads to obesity, that leads to a host of other problems. If you got high blood pressure, there's a lot of the same root cause issues that are going on. So this is not just about having a better brain. The body is a system of systems. Everything works together. And you can't get your brain to a better place without bringing the whole body along for the ride. So if you want to get your energy up, if you want to feel better, if you want to look better, if you want to really improve your health span so that it's more likely to match your lifespan, this is what you have to do. And there are two broad categories to pay attention to. I've already been talking about biomarkers. There are things in blood tests that you can look at. They're not the esoteric, fluffy stuff that some of the longevity programs look at. We're talking about foundational things to how every cell in your body works. And we can certainly get into some of the specifics of what you might measure and look at. People have access to direct-to-consumer labs all over the country now. There's many different options. So we could spend a little time on that. But I would tell people, in answer to your question of where do you start with lifestyle factors, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can't medicate or supplement your way out of. And there's a short list of things. So I'll give you the list, and then we can dig into however many of them that you might want to.
Let's go.
Think of the acronym BEDS, BEDDSS. And that stands for brain training, exercise, diet, dental health, sleep, and stress management. Now, I'll give you a quick overview of each of those, and we can go deeper on any of them that you might want to. But when you hear brain training, a lot of people think, oh, well, I already do Sudoku every day, so I'm good. There's nothing wrong with doing Sudoku if you enjoy doing that. But all that's going to happen is that you're going to get better at Sudoku. Brain training really involves stimulating your brain with new tasks. You have to have novel cognitive experience. in order to force new connections. If it's something that you've been doing for a while, maybe when you first start doing it, if you've never played Sudoku before and you start, that may be a little bit of brain training, but over time, you just get used to it. But you have to have new things to do. So if you start brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand or eating with your non-dominant hand, that's a type of brain training because you got to form some new connections and figure out how to coordinate all of that stuff. If you travel and you don't use your GPS and you're forming new mental maps, that's brain training. If you're learning new dance moves, I'm a musician. I play the piano, the saxophone, and the organ. Let me tell you, when I first started learning how to play the organ in my 30s, it was so painfully difficult. Music that's very easy for me to play at sight on the piano is ridiculously difficult when you first start playing the organ because it's a different instrument. You got to play with your feet and your hands. You got to figure out how to have your left foot moving to the left while your left hand is moving to the right at the same time. It's crazy. It's so painfully difficult. But as I was learning to do that, after weeks and even months of practicing every day and feeling like such a beginner, I noticed that there was real translation into how I was performing in the workday. My mind was sharper. I felt clearer. My mood was even up. And it was because I was doing some really intentional brain training. When it comes to exercise, if you could put in a pill all of the benefits from exercise and what that does for the brain and the body, it would be the best-selling medication in the history of anything. When you are physically active, it stimulates a growth factor for brain cells called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's like Miracle-Gro for brain cells. It improves metabolic health. It improves insulin sensitivity. There's so much that can be done. And yet a lot of business leaders feel like, I'm busy. When am I going to have time to exercise? Or they think, yeah, I go to the gym and I get my 30 to 60 minute workout every morning. I'm good. I'm here to tell you, if you exercise 30 to 60 minutes in the morning, then you go sit at a desk as a desk jockey the rest of the day, that's called being an active couch potato. And metabolically, it's just about as bad as skipping the workout. The body is meant to move. And you can actually get better results with an easier strategy. In our membership community, we have a couple of expert physiologists. One of them used to train Olympic athletes, and they hold office hours for our members every week, and they help people learn how to use microdose exercising to get far better results. And what that looks like for a busy leader is maybe you do a 30-minute workout in the morning or even a 15-minute high-intensity interval workout, but then once an hour for 3 to 5 minutes, you move intensely. You do an exercise snack. You could get up from your desk and jump a fake rope. You could jog in place. You could go up and down the stairs. You could do 40 push-ups. I mean, the possibilities are practically endless. But if you do that once every hour to hour and a half, all day long, number one, you're already taking some breaks anyway, but you're going to rev the engine. You're going to keep the blood flowing. You're going to perform better in the workday. Your energy's going to be up. And from a metabolic standpoint, you're probably going to have a lot more benefit than if you just go crank it out hard for 60 minutes in the morning and then sit at the desk all day long.
That's so good. And it's such common sense. The thing that, as you were sharing these first two, novel cognitive experience, I'm running through my list of things that I need to start doing, different little things, right? They require intentional thought, which means you're leading yourself, you're making the choices, and then looking for the opportunities that exist in everyday life. I used to do walking one-to-ones. Right? So when I'd have a one-to-one meeting with someone, if it wasn't raining outside, we were going for a walk, and it was awesome. It was such a good way to clear the head. I wasn't doing it for brain health. I was doing it just because I didn't want to be sitting at my desk any longer. But now I'm thinking about all these little ways to incorporate this into a routine that makes it normal. Okay, carry on. So you got brain training, we have exercise. What's next?
Let's talk diet. And there's a lot of tribalism when it comes to diet. And I think it's muddying the water unnecessarily. People are fighting over what's the best diet for humans. I think that's a ridiculous argument. If you actually think that every single human on the planet needs to eat in exactly the same way and you're going to fight over that, then you probably don't know much about physiology. My 16-year-old son who runs track and cross country and thinks nothing of going out and doing 10 miles a day, and he's growing fast to boot, is in a completely different metabolic state than an 80-year-old who's been sedentary for the last 50 years and needs to lose 300 pounds and has Alzheimer's disease. They're not even in the same ballpark. I think it's more effective to leverage principles. And we don't have time to get into everything, but I'll give you a few things to consider. One is that food is fuel. And I realize that we use food as part of our culture and celebrations all over the world. But at the core, food is fuel. And the way that you fuel your body depends on how you're running the engine. If you're doing a lot of sedentary work, that's running the engine far differently than if you're at the gym as a bodybuilder working out hard 3 hours a day trying to build muscle. So you have to choose your fuel based on your goals. And if you can learn to look at a meal and say, what have I hired this meal to do for me? Then you start to unlock the mindset. So for example, about 9 years ago, when I first met Randy, our medical director, I was 30 pounds overweight. I was tired. I didn't hardly recognize myself, but I had this growing awareness that I was probably going to have an early death if I didn't do something. I was stressed to the max. I had been on call 24/7, running a busy memory care community, and I was just not in a good place. And when Randy and I connected, and I really started to learn the science of what it takes to get our brains to a better place, I instantly knew what I needed to change. I had a problem of too much insulin in the blood. I was resistant to insulin signaling. And the only way to correct that is to not provoke an insulin response as much. When insulin goes up, insulin receptors become less sensitive. It's kind of like if you yell, you cover, the other person covers their ears. You turn on a jet engine, you better have ear protection. The signal goes up and we downregulate. Versus if you're whispering, then you lean in and you pay closer attention. When it comes to insulin signaling, it's the same is true in the body. So I realized, wow, I got to quit provoking such an insulin response. So I went on a ketogenic diet, basically cut most of my carbohydrates out. And within a couple of months, the pounds came off. I had a shoulder injury at the time. I wasn't even exercising. My body just knew what to do. And I realized, wow, insulin is the hormone of growth and storage. And when insulin's up, you're in store mode. So I had to get insulin down. And I almost immediately noticed that I felt an incredible clarity. My mind was so sharp. I was getting more stuff done and it felt amazing. So even though I lost the weight in a couple of months, I kept going on a strict ketogenic diet for a lot longer. And then I started thinking, you know what? I'm going to lose muscle mass. If I keep this up, it's not going to help me toward my long-term goals. I need to maintain muscle mass. I really like how I feel during the workday. So what if I experiment with eating super low carb during the workday? And then I liberalize my diet just a little bit in the evening. I add in some potatoes or rice or sweet potatoes or other slow carbs so that I kind of shift out of that ketogenic state. Just enough that I provoke a little bit of an insulin response and I'm not losing weight. For me, that was really key. I'm not saying that's what everybody should do. I'm not dispensing medical advice here, but the principle worked because now my sugars run really steady during the workday. I don't have crashes in energy. I feel amazing. I've been able to test myself over and over, and my body starts shifting into a mild state of nutritional ketosis by late in the day, which means my energy actually ramps up toward the end of the workday instead of sagging.
Interesting.
And I liberalize my diet a little bit at night so that I'm preserving muscle mass, and my weight has been very steady now for years. Other than when I'm working hard to build muscle mass, I've been able to do that. So that has worked for me, but the principles can apply to anybody. Whatever somebody does dietarily, we have to be sensitive to insulin. Too much insulin in the blood is at the root of a lot of the health problems people face. 80% of people with Alzheimer's have real resistance to insulin signaling. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, which has been on the rise in women and is causing increased infertility and other challenges for women, that's basically just insulin resistance of the ovary. There's all kinds of other health conditions that relate to too much insulin in the blood. The other thing that I'd say about diet is whatever you're doing, eat real food. if what you're putting in your mouth was made by a chemist in a lab instead of a cook, there's a problem with it and it doesn't belong in the human body. If it's real, if it's in the form that you find it in nature or slightly altered a little bit, you've combined some ingredients and you've cooked it versus you've pulled something out of a package that doesn't look anything like what you find in the real world, then you're going to do better if you eat real food.
It's just fascinating. This whole insulin idea and the insulin response, to sugars and all these things, especially with all the artificial sugars and sugars and everything. My wife and I were just talking about this recently. Like, okay, we need to be very intentional about the amount of refined sugar, processed sugar that we're consuming. And we watch it, but probably more with an eye towards a vanity metric of, weight loss or things like that than a cognitive metric, which is frankly a lot more important. And so when you're talking about this, I keep going to this place of there's a bilateral impact here. It's not just a single place. This is not something you do to lose weight. It's the brain. In fact, we're not even talking about losing weight. We're talking about cognitive capability, but all these things have corollary to the impact that it has on our physical selves. And so like this idea that you mentioned of a system of systems is so important and so powerful to me. The other thing that really popped out as you were walking through that is an understanding of what the job of insulin is to do. And I'm not a medical expert in any way, but when you talk about it being a hormone of growth and storage, oh, okay, this is what that system is meant to do. How am I leveraging the system? And oh, by the way, if I've been in a place of just eating things that taste really good without an understanding of the impact on the system, I'm sending my body the wrong signals. I'm just eating what tastes good. And the body's going, well, I know how to process this chemically, and this is how it manifests.
I think people often are eating based on their craving, and that usually will have you doing exactly the opposite of what would give you the best result. So let me give you an analogy for an insulin signaling problem. Let's say that you're driving down the highway and you see a car off to the side with their flashers on. You pull off to be a good Samaritan and help out. You say, what's going on? And they say, well, we don't have any gas in the tank. You say, well, I've got some in the trunk. Let me get my gas can. And as you walk around the side of the vehicle to where their gas tank is, you look down and you're shocked because there's 6 cans of gas there. And you say, it looks like you got all the gas that you need. And they say, yeah, but we broke the spout. We're trying to pour it in the tank and it just runs down the side. The car, if it had feelings, would be craving fuel. And yet if you broke the spout, you're not getting fuel in the tank. Mm-hmm. That is an insulin signaling problem, basically. And people who have a lot of resistance to insulin crave sugar. Alzheimer's patients have a major, major issue most of the time with insulin signaling, and they would eat 25 cookies a day, but they would end up overfed and undernourished. There'd be all this sugar in the bloodstream, which is damaging, but the cell would still not be getting glucose that it can convert into energy. And so the signal from the brain is, give us some fuel, give it to us fast. The highest sugar content thing imaginable is what we want because we need a quick hit, we're crashing. If people could see that, then they would start to recognize the number one cause of intermittent anxiety is actually a blood sugar problem. And a lot of that is driven by an insulin signaling problem.
I feel like we could have an entire episode just on this connection because you're shifting the way I'm thinking about this. And like this the gas can spout metaphor is brilliant because I want this thing, but there's a process that's broken. And I'm thinking about in leadership, we want this result and we focus on the what we think the problem is without actually recognizing or diagnosing the problem. The metaphor that I use is oftentimes when I'm working with leaders, we're talking about they're dealing with the symptoms of an execution failure. Like, why don't people do this? This is so frustrating, et cetera. And so they just work harder. They just do more. When really what we have is we have a clarity issue or alignment issue. We have people who are unclear where we're going and why it matters and what they need to do. And they're not aligned to that. They're not actually putting their effort in the right place. And this metaphor of the gas can and the spout is really helping me connect some dots there. Here's the truth that most leaders won't admit. You're not stuck because you don't know what to do. You're stuck because you haven't codified how you lead. Our Vision to Victory Leadership Accelerator is where we fix that. It's a 12-week experience where we install the leadership operating system, the frameworks, the cadence, the metrics that turn your instincts into a repeatable system your team can follow. You'll walk out with clarity on your vision, a strategy that aligns your team, and an execution rhythm that compounds over time. There are only 12 seats, and our next cohort launches April 14th. This is not a course. It's a small group of leaders building together. If you're ready to lead with clarity instead of chaos, go to b2bleadership.com to learn more. The one you said next surprises me. We're just going to walk through these, and then I want to go to like a couple quick things that you would, people start doing tomorrow. Dental hygiene. Like I did not see that coming. Tell me more.
It's something that a lot of people don't see coming, but when you look at the research and you look at people who donated their brains to science and they died with Alzheimer's disease, a shocking high percentage of people have P. gingivalis bacteria in the brain. That's the bacteria that causes gum disease. Let me tell you about the case that really woke me up to just how important dental health is. There was a lady named Gina from Michigan who developed Parkinson's disease in her late 50s. And it came on fast and it was aggressive. And very quickly, she got to the point that she lost her job. She couldn't function anymore. She couldn't put on makeup. She couldn't feed herself. She couldn't wipe her own bottom. It was devastating. Her husband burned through all his FMLA trying to be there and assist her. She tried all sorts of different things. She did not respond well to medications for Parkinson's disease. So she just shook and she could hardly walk. She was basically wheelchair bound if she had to go more than 2 or 3 feet. And in a last ditch effort to improve things, she came out to Idaho so that she could spend a month working with Randy. And she said, I've got nothing to lose. I want you to do everything that you could possibly think of doing for somebody. And Randy said, well, something is causing a major inflammatory response in your system, and we've got to do some detective work and figure out what are the contributing factors. And as part of that, he said, I want you to go to a dentist friend of mine. He's going to do a CT scan of your mouth and look at things that wouldn't necessarily show up on traditional x-rays. And she pushed back. She said, I pay for an extra cleaning every year. Are you sure that I need to do this? I actually floss every day. I've got a clean bill of health. My teeth are really clean. And he said, look, you said do everything. We're doing everything. Well, earlier in life, she had 3 root canals. And when you remove a root, you're also removing the blood supply and therefore the oxygen supply. And there are little microbes in the body called anaerobes that flourish in a low oxygen environment. And sometimes if you remove the root to a tooth, if it's not done just exactly right, then those anaerobes can start to flourish. And over time, they can etch away bone and leave an open pathway into the bloodstream. And that is what this dentist found when he did a CT scan of her mouth. She had 3 pockets where bacteria was leaching into the bloodstream. So she did about $10,000 of dental work, rebuilt all that bone structure, and then about 3 months later, she had a 95% reduction of her symptoms. I will never forget the text message that Randy forwarded to me. She sent him this text message where she set down her phone on a dock at a lake near her house. And she said, watch this. And she went skipping away down the dock, flipped a 180, came skipping back, and then stuck her face down at the camera and said, thank you so much. I'm getting my life back. And then she sent a picture of her going through the Starbucks drive-thru because she hadn't driven in years and she could drive again. She came on a Zoom meeting for all of our members in our weekly masterclass. She told her story. And then she got up and she said, I got to show you this, guys. And she stood up and she walked to the back of the room. We all started cheering because we thought, hey, she can walk again. And she's no longer wheelchair bound. She said, no, that's not it. She started cranking out jumping jacks. And my jaw was on the ground, Dusty. I was like, I will never think about dental health and how important it is ever again in my life.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I need to go floss. But it's the system of systems. It's these things that have causal influence on a downstream issue that don't seem connected. And so when you start thinking about this through the lens of a system of systems and you start pulling levers and making manipulations, you get change at a level that you're not thinking about it. It's not one-to-one. It's not corollary in the most obvious manner. I would not have seen that coming. Sleep. I'm all about, and I understand sleep. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about it, because I went a deep dive on this years ago, Dr. Matt Walker, Why We Sleep, and a whole bunch of books. I've worn an Oura ring since 2019, which has mainly just told me that I'm not good at sleeping. I haven't actually modified behavior until recently. Earlier this year, I said, I need to really fix this. And, I'm cutting out all alcohol. I'm going to do all things that really, I think, are control levers. Talk to me about sleep and the linkages or the system effect on cognitive load and the neurodegeneration offsets that we're thinking about.
So you've already read quite a bit about sleep. You understand a lot of these principles. And I bet a lot of people listening intuitively know that sleep is important. We all know what it's like to not get a good night's sleep. But I want to go a little bit deeper. Have you ever heard of the glymphatic system?
I've heard of it, but I couldn't tell you what it did.
So researchers only really proved that it exists in about 2014. But back as far as about the 1980s, researchers recognized that the lymphatic system, sort of the sewer of the body, doesn't get past the blood-brain barrier. And they said, well, how does the brain get rid of metabolic waste and misfolded proteins and debris? There's got to be some mechanism for that. And over time, they started calling it the glymphatic system. And by 2014, imaging studies and research was good enough to find really strong evidence that indeed there is a glymphatic system in the brain. And the understanding so far is that when we're asleep, the brain shrinks a little bit. The fluid-filled spaces, the ventricles, open up. The body makes about 1.5 cups of new cerebrospinal fluid. And there's a deep, slow wave pulsing action that takes place when we're in deep sleep that acts like a pumping mechanism, and it pumps up misfolded proteins and cellular waste and debris, and it gets it into that fluid, and then it flushes it out into the lymphatic system, where then we excrete it from the body. And if you are not cycling through each of the stages of sleep several times a night effectively, it's basically like not running the dishwasher at night. Most people run the dishwasher while they're asleep, so they wake up in the morning to clean dishes. Well, if you don't run it, then the dishes pile up and you've got problems. If you are not sleeping deeply and consistently, then you're not taking out the trash. Getting less than 7 hours of sleep consistently, or getting very poor sleep, like you have undiagnosed sleep apnea, which is super common. If that's the case, you have a major Alzheimer's risk factor, independent of everything else. So sleep is critical. And if you want to get rid of all the sticky plaques that form in the Alzheimer's brain, or the twisted up tangles that form in the Alzheimer's brain, sleep is a really important way to do that. It's one of the reasons why I say you've got to start with lifestyle factors, because you can't medicate or supplement your way out of a poor night's sleep. You might be able to throw something like caffeine on top of it and be functional, but it doesn't mean that you're actually getting rid of the trash. And over time, things build up and it's going to destroy you.
I remember when I was reading some of the research I did, because I think I wanted to understand it. And I remember reading about how both Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, were diehard, sleep 4 hours a night, leaders of the free world, get by on the minimum amount of sleep. Both had dementia, Alzheimer's disease. And that's when I started to wake up. Now, I'll admit I'm a 6.5 to, 7. For years, I was probably in the 5.5 to 6.5. And I've been working on it and finding ways to change upstream the things that are impacting my ability to sleep. And it's amazing how different you feel. And now I defend it, quite rigorously and say, no, I'm not going to do that thing because it will impact my sleep. And it's really powerful. What I didn't know, the way you just simplified that for all of us is sleep is not a necessary evil. It's a necessary part of the body's restoration process. And if we don't take out the trash, we're going to have a problem at some point. And unfortunately, that problem, if you do this for 20, 30, 40 years, that problem becomes a real problem later in life, and you don't have nearly the control over. So a simple thing like getting more sleep makes so much sense. All right, let's put a bow around this with stress management, and that's something I talk about and hear from leaders all the time and work on for myself is how do we manage stress? Is stress a state of mind? Is it a state of choice and prioritization? Talk to me about stress management through your lens and what we need to be doing or thinking about to optimize for health.
Well, the first thing that I'll say might shock you and the people listening, and that's that in a certain way, we actually need more stress in our lives. Oh. Part of why we are not doing well is, I'll borrow a term from Dr. Ben Bickman, who's a doctor of physiology. He gave a talk once called The Plagues of Prosperity. And I think we're suffering from the plagues of prosperity because we live in a climate-controlled world. We live in climate-controlled homes, and we get in climate-controlled cars, and we go to climate-controlled offices, and our bodies don't have to deal with the stress of a constantly shifting environment. But the human body was meant to thrive in a dynamic, changing environment. Mm. And the thing that stimulates the body to make more and bigger mitochondria is called hormesis. And hormesis is just a stressor that stimulates the body to become more resilient. So think of a trip to the gym and lifting weights. You're breaking down muscle fibers, you're tearing them. It's a stress on the body. It increases inflammation temporarily, but it stimulates the body to build back stronger. And the signal is, hey, it looks like we need a little bit more muscle. Let's respond and build more. If you're out in the sunshine and that ultraviolet light is hitting your body and you don't have sunscreen on for a short amount of time, or I'm not saying go burn yourself to a crisp, but if you're out there in the stress, that ultraviolet light, you might feel sluggish and tired because it's increasing oxidative stress. And if you don't have enough antioxidants, then it's like you can't clear the exhaust out of the cellular engine. And so it runs a little more sluggishly and you feel tired, even though all you did was sit on the beach. But that's a stressor on the system. And in response, the body says, oh, we're getting more oxidative stress. We better increase antioxidants. And so your body naturally starts making more glutathione and more melatonin and other antioxidants, and you get better results. Cold exposure does the same thing. Low oxygen does the same thing. Fasting stresses the body in a positive way. Now, too much is kind of like, hey, I've been sedentary for the last 30 years, and I need to get more active, so I'm going to go out and run a half marathon today as my first activity. All you're going to do is injure yourself and put yourself in a world of hurt for weeks to come. It could be dangerous. So you have to start by pushing yourself just a little bit more. But in a lot of ways, we actually need more stress in our lives. But when it comes to things that fire up fight or flight and have us in a constant state where our sympathetic nervous system is just overactivated all the time, that's a problem. And the number one thing that I see people forgetting to do is to counterbalance. When stress goes up, our efforts to counterbalance it also need to go up. We can't always change what's going on in our business or in our family or in other aspects of our lives, but we do get to choose to counterbalance. And that can look like taking more exercise snacks, doing some breath work. For me, I play an instrument. That's super relieving of stress and tension when I'm feeling it. Maybe you like to get a massage. There's all sorts of things that people can do that stimulate more of a parasympathetic rest and relax kind of response. And if people don't take anything else about this topic away, it's the idea that if your stress is going up, notice it, and then do something to intentionally counterbalance instead of just accepting, oh, I can't do anything about it.
I love the need more stress. I'm reminded of Michael Easter's book, The Comfort Crisis, which I read a few years ago, which I love. And we're not doing enough hard things. We need that. And then the counterbalancing is so incredibly important, and looking for those opportunities. I was on a call earlier today with my coach, and that was, the thing that he said, hey, I'm picking up on some stress. We don't need to solve a problem. What we need to do is pause so we can have clarity about what really is important and what's really going on here. And it was, he was spot on. He was dead right. And, it's sometimes we can't see these things and we need someone else to see them. But then what you're saying as well is learn to see them for yourself and then develop your mechanism of stress reduction, whatever it is that works. I'm a drummer, so I need to go play the drums a little bit more. I think that would be very stress relieving in a lot of ways.
Yeah. There's one simple thing that people could do when they're stressed that I think would make a huge difference as a counterbalance. And that's if they recognize that stress is going up. Also recognize it's not what's happening that is causing the stress. It's actually how you're viewing it. And if every time you notice that your body's a little triggered into fight or flight, you intentionally reframe, you try to view it from a different angle. You ask questions like, when the COVID pandemic hit, it shut down my business. At that point, we were just serving assisted living professionals. And suddenly, overnight, we couldn't go in those communities at all. We lost almost all of our revenue instantly. But I sat in the office and I intentionally asked the question, what would have to be true for me to look back and say that the COVID pandemic was the very best thing that happened to this company? Well, that's a reframe. And the reason that works is that when you're in that state of fight or flight, your amygdala is calling the shots. Your emotional center, your lizard brain, your emotional brain, which has no capacity for language, is driving everything. And as soon as you start reframing something and you're saying, instead of how is this or why is this happening to me, you're asking, how is this for my good? How is this benefiting me? As soon as you do that, you're putting the prefrontal cortex back in charge. And that gets you out of fight or flight. And if people just practiced reframing in stressful moments, they would develop greater resilience, more grit. They'd spend less time in fight or flight. So maybe just start practicing the reframe every time you feel stressed.
You just said one of my favorite questions to ask people and ask of myself. What would have to be true? What would have to be different in order for me to look at this as a gift and a blessing, not a curse or not something that's happening to me? That's amazing. Eric, I feel like I could continue to grill you for hours. And, at the risk of doing exactly that, I'm going to move us to a couple of rapid fire questions. And then I'd love for you to share, how our audience can learn more about you and the amazing work that y'all are doing and next steps. But let's go to a couple of rapid fire questions first. And I'm particularly interested in this. Normally I ask this through the lens of leadership, but because I believe so fervently that all leadership, all impactful, effective leadership starts with the ability to lead yourself. So I'm really curious about this question. What is a book that you believe every person should read?
I would say Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. Are you familiar with that one?
I am, yes.
I love the fundamental concept of that too many of us interact with others as if they were objects instead of people. And when you treat someone as an object, there's really only three possibilities. They're either a vehicle that you're using to get something that you want, or they're irrelevant to you, or they're an obstacle in your path. I'm a big believer that if you kick a physical object, it'll go in whatever direction you kick it. That's just basic physics. But if you kick a person, they're going to kick you back. And too many people go through life interacting with others on the basis of what they think is justified. Am I justified? What is justified? Oh, this person said that. Well, I'm justified in responding in this way. And whether we're conscious of it or not, I think people are asking, what's justified here? Instead of asking, what would be helpful? There are all sorts of reasons that people do what they do. And sometimes they're not even aware of why they're doing what they're doing and why they're responding in a way that many people would look at as hurtful or certainly not justified. But if we instead ask, what would be helpful here? I think that moves us a little bit closer towards seeing people as people instead of objects.
Love that. Could not agree with you more. And that's an amazing, amazing book. What's a daily practice that you follow that makes you a better leader?
Honestly, I think the most important thing for me is to pray. I pray every day, many times throughout the day. And to me, I'm actually communicating. A lot of that is spending time listening. It's meditative. And, well, for example, I usually start my day after I've read. I personally spend time in scripture. I also spend time reading something that I'm intentionally trying to learn. But then I look over my plan for the day, and I look over the list of things that I need to accomplish. And I will pray about it and say, here's what I have planned for the day. Is there something that I'm missing? And I sit and listen. And frequently things will come up that I hadn't thought of before, and I'll put them on the list. And then I'll review it, and I'll consider what order should I do these things in. Now, obviously, some things are set, they're scheduled, they're on the calendar. But there's a lot of things that don't have a definite time. And I'll go through and try to number what is the most important thing to start with. And if I can get 2 things done, what's the second thing on the list? But I'll pray about it again and say, is that the right order? And every now and then, I feel a strong urge to change the order. And almost without fail, when I do that and I follow the order that I feel inspired to do, it changes the day. I'm able to look back at the end of the day and say, wow, this day never would have worked out the way that it did had I not changed that order. And I think it makes me a better leader and a better person.
That is awesome. There's so much richness in this processing where you're talking about to pray and listen and then be open to the reprioritization, because oftentimes we just get into a following of a process as opposed to really thinking and praying and listening to what the right process is. Okay, last question. At the end of the day, when you go home, when you shut it down, when you go to sleep, what must have happened that makes it a great day for you? What has been accomplished? How do you measure success at the end of a day? What makes it great?
I think for me, without question, it's knowing that I made a difference for the one. It has nothing to do with being on a big stage or talking to this audience or that audience. It's always about finding the one. And if every day I can look back and say, I made a meaningful impact in that person's life, it fills me up. It makes life worth living. I really try to reflect on that every day and say, okay, was I where I needed to be, helping who I needed to help in whatever way they needed it? If I can't be of service to other people, then life doesn't have very much richness and meaning. I don't want to live for myself. I think we do better as humans when we get outside ourselves.
Eric, I love that. If our audience is interested in learning more, they're curious, they're ready to go further and explore optimization for now and for the future, how can they connect with you? How can they learn more about the great work y'all are doing?
The easiest way to connect with me personally is on LinkedIn. Just go to Eric D. Collette, Collett. And I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, share a lot of ideas and insights there. And you can go to amindforallseasons.com to find access to freebies like our weekly newsletter, or I do a daily video called The Caregiver Minute, totally free. There's over 1,400 episodes. And certainly there's paid stuff. There's ways that people can work with us that you'll find there on our website.
Well, I can personally attest to the value of the text messages and the nuggets and pearls of wisdom that you freely share that allows a person to manifest change in their own lives and better themselves. So I am deeply appreciative to you for, hopefully for me being the one today, and you've been able to impact me as the one many times as I've studied and learned. And think about this, doing these things not for me, also for those I love, for those I care about, and for those I lead. And I think this system ideas is this thing that I'm going to keep chewing on and thinking about, because that's also what leadership is. We're leading a system of systems and interconnected processes. And so we need to be very mindful of that. So Eric, thank you so incredibly much for your very gracious donation of your time and your wisdom. And it's such a gift. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the privilege of being here.
Hey, before you go, if this episode helped you see leadership differently, I have 3 personal requests. First, and this is the most important one, share this with one leader who needs it. Think of someone in your network who's frustrated with their team's execution or is trying to scale their own impact. Copy this episode link right now and text them, "Hey, I just listened to this episode and I think you'll get real value from it." That simple act of sharing, that is servant leadership in action. Second, subscribe to Leadership Unlocked. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast player, just hit subscribe or the follow button. That way you won't miss the next episode and it helps us reach more leaders like you. And third, if you're willing, this would be a huge help for us. Leave a 5-star rating and write a quick review. I know it takes 60 seconds of your time, but here's what it does. It helps other leaders discover the show. Every rating, every review, it's how we expand our impact together. So those 3 things: share with a friend, subscribe, leave a review. I'm deeply appreciative, and that would give us so much help. Thanks for being part of the Leadership Unlocked community. Now go create some clarity for others.